Blessings and welcome everyone here in YouTube land. I'm so grateful to be back after a little break over the holiday. And we're starting a little bit early here on YouTube. And I'm going to be getting set up here in Instagram land in a moment. Well, maybe in a minute or two. Really. And I'm so excited to announce that I will be facilitating a Torus Tai Chi workshop. And look at this thing. I'm not really crazy on this thing. Pardon me one moment. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Okay, there we go. I will be facilitating a Torus Tai Chi workshop. Join my email list at my website on the first page, tuesdaymaythomas.com. Go to Instagram and follow me. My link is up top on my main page at YouTube. And there is a Linktree link, and I'll come back here and I'll put one after today's live, a Linktree link to that invitation. It's going to be an hour introduction to this most beautiful and powerful practice. So I would be so grateful if you are guided to join me then. We're going to get started here in just a minute. Oh, I got to get my water. Oh, I'm so grateful. So very, very, very grateful to be here with you. Yay. I'm so excited for today's topic too. I've got so many goodies here on the side and I'm just ready and waiting and waiting and ready and waiting. Oh, look at here. Isn't this very interesting? Let's put this here for now. All right, let's go ahead and begin. I'm so very grateful. As always, blessings and welcome, dear community. I am Tuesday May Thomas, and this is 4D Trinity, my weekly live stream where we hit all the topics regarding your multidimensionality, your spirituality, and how to consciously connect and align that mind and body aspect of self with spirit. And why do we do this? So that we can live in coherency, so that we can live in a most beautiful, beautiful existence that is quite obviously outside of the mayhem of the matrix. Any mayhem we experience in the matrix, we are allowing and we are agreeing to. All blessings. Nice to see you here, Will. And so learning, though, that it's all just information and that we can change that. We can change how we perceive that information. We can change and shift how it is that we decide to digest incoming information as it flows in the universe and use it in such a way that it can bestow its goodness into us. And there's so many tools, right, that we do this with on a day-to-day basis. We are continually bombarded with information, people, places, things, posts, memes, news. If you watch the TV, there's just all sorts of information coming at us. Never mind about the information streaming as a ticker tape throughout our own mind. And so learning how to harness, learning how to see and de-link ourselves and view all of these different aspects from that detached place. And then to work with those aspects and ultimately to decide whether it is we want to work with those aspects or not, or relieve ourselves of them at all, is quite the test, is quite the ongoing work for a master, right? For someone who is choosing self-mastery in this realm, in this third dimension, for someone that is working to cultivate a continuation of peace within themselves so that they can have that peace through the day-to-day experience of simply being. And that's what we're here to do, right? That's what we learn there really is all to do. once you get to a certain point of your ascension, you realize like, okay, it's one thing, right, to heal and to open your third eye, to open your heart, and to gain a certain levity in the world, to have access then to a deeper sense of knowledge and wisdom that is all within, that we learn as we get to know thyself and heal ourselves. And then it's putting all the pieces together, and those 3D energy tools that we gather along the way. How can they serve us? How do they serve us? And are we serving them? You know, it's a two-way street. The relationship you have with each crystal, the relationship you have with each aspect of mystical nuance that you bring into your life. You're developing a relationship, a conscious communication with each of these things. And I have some very, very interesting stories to share with you about my own shenanigans over the years. And also, what my intention is with doing today's show is to re-inspire that communion and that relationship between you and these very sacred items you've been called to. If you think about your life now and you think about the various goodies, the energy tools, the things that you have, we can think about Reiki, right? We can think about this invisible life force energy, this modality that we can learn how to facilitate to ourselves or others. And many students over the years, right, they're called to receive their level 1 attunement. And I teach, as my teacher taught, that the main premise of receiving that attunement is to practice, is to actually lay hands on yourself and to develop a relationship with Reiki yourself. And while sure, you can read books and a million blogs and you know, absolutely go to workshops and learn and discuss with others, there is something about the direct experience, your direct experience of laying hands on yourself and connecting with that source energy yourself, that bestows unto you personal, I'm going to use this word because I saw you hop on here, and I can, even without my glasses, recognize your little handle there, Mystic Artifacts, but that we are bestowed then these artifacts, these inner artifacts within, right? And that we get to come into revelation with and be inspired by. But it's how do we put the pieces together? Oh, thank you for hopping on YouTube. How do we put the pieces together? And as I was mentioning Reiki earlier, the main premise is you use it, right? How many crystals or how many modalities or how many workshops and how many magic items, magic brooms, magic, wands. How many magic items have you gathered over your process? And how is your relationship with these items? How is your relationship and your communion with your crystals? When's the last time you cleaned your altar? I remember many years ago, my favorite teacher in New York, Ruth Lawler, a yogi, she would always do this intro talk with her yoga practice. And she was saying, ooh, she sat to meditate and she just noticed, she had been so busy and she noticed her altar was just covered in a layer of dust. And she had at one point given a half a lemon to Ganesha as an offering, and had looked at it then on the altar, and it had been growing mold and dust, and like just everything was decrepit looking. And she had that realization of like, oh, this is the sacred area that I go to sit, that I go to make myself sacred in communion with the divine. Let me clean this area up. So even on that level, the relationship that we have with a power tool, an energy tool, such as that sacred space that you are called to sit. And maybe there's different power spots in your home, right? Maybe one day you meditate in the living room. The next day you have this set up in your bedroom, this little area that you like to lay your cushion down or set your candle at. And maybe there's a specific shelf or there's a specific area, a piece of furniture that you have designated specifically for that sacred practice. Charge it up. Anytime you give your energy to that sacred space, you're giving that sacred energy to the sacred that is within you, and you're creating a connecting point for it to be amplified. And that's the blessing And that's what the root of our talk is today, is in recognizing and putting to use the tools that we have been guided to. So as I said, for so many students that I facilitate Reiki with, they come and then maybe we'll check in a little while later and they'll, be going through the list of all the things that are coming up emotionally or the hardships that are going on. And often my first question is, well, have you been laying hands on yourself? Have you been practicing Reiki? Have you been drawing the symbol? Have you been using the symbol? Have you been inviting it into your body, into your mind when you have those thoughts that disrupt you? And often the answer is no. And it's that simple application. If you've been guided to a crystal, if you've been guided to a modality, if you've been guided to a science, to a drum, to a sacred workshop, or to anything at all, to do anything that is going to imbibe you, in that sacred quality, approach it as such and know that you are strengthening that connection. So again, if there is a modality that you've chosen, yoga, right? Again, here's another thing. There's so many things that are right in front of us and that we've chosen. But the thing is that we get to continue choosing it, right? That's one of my things in my monthly love letters, that if you are not signed up, go to the link tree at Instagram, and I'll put a description later in the description box here on YouTube of how you can sign up for my monthly love letter, because in it I'll often be speaking about, in this new year, this aspect of our Jedi wisdom, our Jedi activation. And it's one thing to have a staff or a lightsaber or a magic wand. It's another thing to use it, to put it to use, right? It's one thing to go and buy a crystal and then sit it on your bookshelf. And it's another thing to cleanse it, to clear it, to talk to it, to commune with it, and to set an intention with it, and to let it be activated in your presence. These are all aspects that are within our reach, yet sometimes we'll gather and we'll accrue a lot of crystals or a lot of modalities. And then we'll say, God, my back really hurts, or something's going on. And it's like, okay, have you laid your hands with Reiki? Oh, what about that yoga stretch you learned? Or that series of stretches. So the medicine to create the coherency and the wholeness that is ultimately what we're after when we buy a crystal, when we're learning Reiki, when we're learning any modality, or gathering a staff, a broom, creating a magic wand. Like I said, I have these toys here I'm going to be introducing, shakers and such. Sure, maybe there's just a part of us that likes to collect and gather. And there are some people that they just, they really like to just have artifacts. And that is a part of their being in the presence of those sacred powers and allowing those energies to hold space for them. Because that is what our sacred denominations, these aspects that we're called to, that's what they're doing for us, is they are holding space for us to remember our oneness, to remember our wholeness. And it is in using and putting to use, like a Jedi, like a ninja, right? If you're practicing Tai Chi and you feel like your energy is all out of whack, do your Tai Chi. It's like, you've learned a breathing technique and you're going mental in your mind. Use the technique, and it's very, very simple. And sometimes we just need to be reminded, though, of how very simple it all can be, and just sort of nudged in a way to put these things to use. So I want to tell you a story. Many, many years ago, years and years ago. So we'll start, I don't know where we're going to start. I don't know where we're going to go. Honestly, I have no notes, but we're going to shoot from the hip. Many years ago, I worked at the Bodhi Tree bookstore in 1996 when I was coming up, fully meditating and just fully activated in all my juicy kundalini-ness and deep in the study of all this stuff in metaphysics and spirituality. And I was divinely guided to a turquoise and silver bracelet. And I felt that my protection, my energy protection laid in this bracelet. And to a certain degree, as long as I thought that way, that was the truth. That was so for me. And as long as I had that bracelet on my wrist, and I cleansed it and I talked to it and I charged it, I felt ready. I felt protected wherever I traveled, wherever I went in the world. But what happened when that bracelet was gone off of my wrist? Right? Then there was danger. But this is all in our mind, you see. All of these aspects of not being protected, of not being whole, they all reside in our mind. And ultimately, it's allowing the mind to become coherent with the heart, with that divine cosmic wisdom of love in the heart, that all divine puzzle pieces of self within and all around are given the correct conditions to reset themselves in that divine alignment. So all we're doing is we are reminding ourselves, we are remembering of the potency and the power of those tools that we've already been guided to. And it's interesting because I had got that bracelet. A couple years after that, I had then backpacked. If you read my book, The Reiki Apprentice, I do a nice little autobiography in there of my backpacking adventures. And there's one part that's not in the book, but where a group of us had driven to one of the small towns in Greece to make money to buy food for the group, for the Rainbow Gathering. And because I sang and I played guitar, I took my guitar and did all that. And I remember there was this couple with us. There was about 10 of us that went off into the city, and that's a whole other story. And we had these shenanigans, but there was this gorgeous couple that had fallen in love at the Rainbow. And he had chains and crystals and malas for days and big old rings. And she had all like Madonna Lucky Star bracelets for days and just all sorts of gear, right? They were wearing all sorts of gear and they looked freaking awesome. They were like, whoa, who is this power couple? Because they just had all the bling. But they had this really profound moment. I remember where we were staying. And we were allowed to sleep, all 10 of us in our sleeping bags, on the roof of this very kind Greek man. But right over the edge of this roof was the ocean. And I remember this couple, they went through this really visceral, powerful healing together. And they stood at the edge, and one by one, they ripped off each bracelet, each necklace, each like literally ripped it off, threw it into the ocean. And I sat there and I was like, wow. And I had never seen anything like this before, you see. And I was going, oh my God. And they were both like, we don't need this stuff. We don't need this stuff to know that we are enough, to know that we are one. We have found love. They found love with one another. And what they had realized is that the gathering of all of these amulets and all of these accoutrements was their way of calling that love in the third dimension into themselves, was their way of showering themselves with love, of learning and practicing self-love. They put their totems, their amulets, their crystals to use. And what had they done then? They had attracted their divine lover. And so was their realization then that they did not need these crystals. They didn't need all the bling anymore. And it was just so beautiful because they did not leave a string on their being, and they let it all go. And they threw it into the ocean. And I thought that was so profound and that was so beautiful, because ultimately we do get to the point where we remember and we realize that we are the crystal. You are the staff. A lot of you know, right, here we go. A lot of you know I like to practice, right, with the staff, the Chinese bow staff. And it came along at a time when I was very depressed after I finished the Reiki Apprentice, and I got very, very depressed. And the tar body came to visit. And I remember the light body said, kid, you got to start swinging a staff around. You got to start to learn how to face your shadow. And this learning the staff is going to be one way that we are inviting you to learn. So I found a little school in Santa Monica when I was living in LA, started showing up for these bongtaji, for this Korean bow staff, and learning all this staff work, and really having this deep realization, especially when my Sifu gave me this staff. And I remember there was this moment, and I had only been in class a couple months, and he had given it to me, and I was like, ooh, and it felt so very powerful. And I remember taking it home and I slept with it. Do you sleep with your crystals? Do you sleep with your goods, with your drum, with your broom, right? We're going to talk about the brooms and such here in a little bit. But I remember I slept with it and I started meditating with it in my lap and just really connecting with it and spinning it too. And realizing that my joy was in actually not so much in fighting and learning how to kill with this weapon for combat, but there's this realization that this staff was actually representative of my spine, of the spinal cord, the crystalline tube that runs through the center line of the body that houses the chakras in the spine, right? And that we breathe life force in. And I realized that what I was doing as I was guided by the light body to activate my relationship, to establish a relationship with the staff, was to get in tune with my backbone, was to get in tune with the part of me that was going to say no to the tar body, and to stand up to the shadow within myself and say, get thee behind me. You shall not pass. It was my way of generating my backbone, my spine, my light, my crystalline tube, my ability to take in life force, my ability then to create the correct conditions for that life force to become the greater essence within me. So there was less room for tar to be present within. right? So the more light we accrue into ourselves, the more we use our 3D power, energy tools, right, in that powerful way, the more they can work for us. And that's another part that I'm so really wanting to put forward to you, is that you can buy the crystal, you can accrue a staff, you can get a drum, but there's another thing. When you meditate, you take that drum out into the earth, out into nature, or sit in your meditation and you light the candle and you start to develop a relationship with it. Everything is its own entity. Everything will speak to you. And even if this is a part of your intuition, you feel, well, I never speak to anything, and things never speak to me, and I don't have that cultivation, yet it's there. And all you have to do is to continue to establish that. When you reach out to the drum, to the crystal, to the Reiki, to the staff, to the broom, to the shaker, you're creating a line of connection to it so that it can reach back to you. And it's all becoming a frequency match. That's all it is. When you say, I honor you, I'm called to you, I welcome you, I don't know how to even use you, maybe it's totally new, but I'm a humble student to you, and I welcome you into my life, and I'm teachable, is the thing as well, right? Sometimes, and even if you feel that in this life you are an advanced shaman, we know, right? The masters know that there is something really powerful about remaining ever teachable and to maintaining that sense of a beginner's mind. So even though I might have done tons of shamanic healings and whatever with the drum, every time I sit with the drum, it's like, wow, it's a new moment. Show me, teach me, and it will talk to you, and it will develop that relationship back with you. And over time, what happens then is that this strengthening occurs. Now, after a very bad breakup in Spain, I moved to the desert in 2010. And that was the time where I met my first apprentice, my first spiritual apprentice. And she was in LA and I was living in the desert at the time. And I remember going into the secondhand store and seeing 2 brooms. And now this is the small, if you know Trader Joe's, they sell these right during the Thanksgiving time. And there was one that was about 2.5 foot long, but it looked like this little guy, right? It looked like this little guy, but it was a 2.5 footer. And then there was one that was about 1 foot long, and they were right next to each other at the second hand. And I remember getting a very clear download that I was supposed to buy those brooms, one for me and one for my apprentice. And now I'm not a witch. I don't claim to be a witch. That's not my grid. There's no manipulation. There's no force of will. Everything I share, everything we do is always for the highest good of all. And it's really delinking, detaching. It's just knowing that where we place our energy and our intention is going to create the correct conditions for that energy to flow. The God phone. So we'll continue with that in a moment. Hello. Blessings, dear God. I know it's been a minute. God says hi. Yes, it's taking time. And time is an illusion. Thank you for being here, always. A little bit from A Course in Miracles. Yeah, okay. God is like, there's no problem. There's no problem ever. It is just the arrangement of our mind and how we are viewing and perceiving things that gets to be corrected. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we'll dip in. Thank you, God. God sends love. Blessings. Thank you. Okay. So over time, I remember sitting them with these brooms and really just meditating with them and asking them, what am I supposed to do with you? I've never really used a broom before. What am I supposed to do? And the first, the one that had designated itself for me had told me like, oh, you're going to use this broom to sweep your energy. And I thought, oh, this is freaking awesome. And I got a visual in my mind, and it was literally using the broom to sweep down the aura, to sweep, to ground, to cleanse, and to purify, and to bring the energy down. And I remember then I started using it in that way. And I was going through a very tumultuous time for a 6-month period, really healing my heart after a relationship. And I was frazzled, open wounds, just fully healing and going through a lot. And I began this daily ritual with sweeping my energy. Now I had the Reiki, I had my meditation, my walks, my hiking, but there's more. If we're guided for more, then there's more ways we can begin to hit the fractal aspects of self and bring that healing. I started to brush, I started to broom, and feeling this activation. And then little by little, the broom would tell me as it recognized my relation with it and my correspondence with it and my trust in it and my use in it, it started giving me more ideas. It started recognizing that I was a responsible co-participator. And so it said, okay, kid, let's give you more. If this is serving you, it's filling you up. There's a divine connection here. Let's give you more. So it started showing me more and more ways to use it, as we would with a lot of Reiki. Back then, I was doing a lot of painting. At the end of every painting, right, I would put this magic broom brush across each painting and give it a blessing. And there's so many more ways that we could use it. And eventually, I was guided to give that smaller broom to my apprentice. Now, here we go, though. With that apprentice, that was a 3-year situation. I'm getting to the point with the broom and the power of our magic tools because they hold space for us. Now, this apprentice is half deaf, okay? So there was a lot of things that I would say, if I didn't say them at a certain level, she couldn't hear, or maybe she didn't hear correctly. So there was a continual conversation about regurgitating sort of what has been communicated. Are we understanding it on the same level? Is it soaking in? Do you get it? Okay, good. But there was often this little play with me having to come back and remember that she's hard of hearing. And so I got to really be clear and speak up. So we're about 2 years into the apprenticeship. A part of the apprenticeship is because it's different for every individual that I spend that sort of time with. But there were a handful of mushroom sacred ceremonies in the desert that we undertook together, getting to know each other on these higher realms, understanding metaphysics and multidimensional nature of all of cosmos, including self, going on journey walks and discovering, speaking with nature, having those conversations, developing that divine communion with nature, and really listening, because that's what a big part of being a student of any mystical, spiritual structure and teaching is to do with learning how to listen. Remember, being teachable. Even if you're already a teacher, being teachable. And that student, my student, that first apprentice, was very teachable and an amazing student. One time, we're in the desert doing one of our shamanic Reiki, ceremonies of induction and this apprenticeship, and we're going in deeper now this time. What happens? Well, we start on our journey, and it becomes obvious to me that, oh, this is a journey with the shadow tonight. And we had not had that yet. Everywhere we went on our journey, because usually what would happen is there would be a ceremony, it would begin around the fire, and then spirit would come and would guide us, and I would guide or she would guide, and we'd go, and there would be awakenings, there would be lessons, there would be teachings, there would be gifts, as you know, if you study in this way with any mystical altered state of consciousness, psilocybin or any other practice in that way. You don't even have to have mushrooms, right? This is all just altered state of consciousness that you can have as well. But for us, it was with these mushrooms. But I could tell, and we each, I had my drum and my broom, the one that was this long. So we're out and we're doing our thing, and everywhere we walked, it was like we'd get so far and spirit would be clunk. There'd be like this big X, and she and I was aware of it, but she wasn't reading it. And I was like, we can't go there. We can't go there. Don't you feel this? And that's a part of the apprenticeship where we'd be like, okay, stop. Do you feel this? Listen, what is this part? If you go past this part, past this rock, what does your energy, telling you? What is the energy of this rock, of the land, informing you of, And basically it was saying, do not go past this area. And so it was part of my job is to help bridge her into that awareness to listen. Again, to have that, to develop that communion. So this went on for an hour or two where we just continued walking within this certain radius. And every time we'd sort of bump into a certain edge of it, universe, spirit, the land itself would say, do not pass. And I was like, okay, well, this is it. This is a part of the lesson tonight. We're learning to listen. And because there was a lot of dark energy out that night, for whatever it was like, okay, this is protecting us. It's keeping us in a safe boundary for wherever we're supposed to go for this journey, the lessons we're supposed to share tonight. So this is what happened. We always climb rocks in the middle of the night over there too during ceremony. So we're going by the rocks, and she's a very avid rock climber. She begins to find this nestling up between these bushes, and she starts to climb up, and I'm scoping it out, and I'm, being the teacher, I'm just very super uber aware and checking the space out. And as she's climbing up, I begin to see there's this big bush next to us on the side, and the bush begins to rumble, like it begins to move. And I start to hear this gurgling sound, and I'm going like, what the heck is going on? Now I've got my little mini backpack, my broom tucked into it, my drum, all the, the little accoutrement, the crystals, the shakers, all the matches, the lighter, all the little things you would need on such a little adventure. And she starts to climb up, and I was like, oh, wait, is there an animal? Is there something? Like I got a direct hit that there's something in this big dark bush. We're in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert. And this big bush this bush was probably 12 foot by 6 foot height. It starts to move, and there's no wind. And then I start to hear what sounds like a mountain lion growl. And as soon as I heard that mountain lion growl, I was like, oh, Spirit saying, get the F out of here. So I'm like, I get her. And knowing that she can't hear, I'm like, I pull on her leg because she's starting to scale up. I pull on the leg of her leggings, and she turns around, and I'm like, out. And she's like, what? And the thing is growling. And I'm like, and she can't hear the freaking growling. And I'm like, oh, and the bush is stirring. And I'm like, get out, no. And she's like, what? And I'm like, but I'm trying not to raise my voice either, because this thing that I don't know what's this thing in the bush. Anyway, so she finally gets down. We go out. I put my hands on her back. So we make like we're like this big entity being walking out back to the road. We get into the clear, and I'm like dying. I'm like, whoo, breaking a sweat. And I'm like, did you not hear that? Did you not see that? She's like, what? And I'm like, oh my God. And even to this day, she's like, was there really a mountain lion? I'm like, girl, if your ears could hear, you would be so freaked out, because this is what happened. So the next day we go back, we trail back, and we're scoping out all the little areas we went to. And we go back, and what is there in the pathway from the big bush and the rock she started climbing? But my broom, the 2.5 footer one, was laying right on that pathway. Instantly, I thought, oh, sacred protection. This broom took in the 3D world. Now, remember, in this fourth dimensional consciousness, this level of Christ consciousness where all is one, all is perfection, right? There is no sacrifice. This word doesn't come up. There's no guilt. There's no sacrifice. There's no binary aspects, right? That we're living by. Yet in the third dimension, and when you're dealing with dark and light aspects, and especially in the shadow ceremony as such, there was very much this level of sacrifice. And I knew that this broom took the brunt. Somehow it had cajoled itself and hopped out of my backpack and laid itself on the ground, creating this perfect stop for whatever being, whether it was a real mountain lion or some kind of an entity that was hanging out in that bush, to not cross the go and follow us as well. So equally as the divine guidance at times on that journey was like, do not go past here, I got to see how that divine broom created that powerful structure, that powerful divine borderline that did not allow that which did not serve, i.e. that mountain lion that I heard growl in the bush, that was getting upset perhaps because we're making noise, and we're, cajoling, and we're on mushroom and whatever, it was very sacred, but still it was very quiet and still. So you get the point. Now, I want to tell you another thing that happened recently. I'm a very chill person generally, right? And let me ask you, do you get upset when someone crosses you off, or if they're honking behind you in traffic? Generally these things do not bother me, and I'm just in my own world. In my own world, doing my own thing. Once in like a million blue moons, I respond. So let's backtrack. This is probably 6 weeks ago. I had gone with 2 of the staffs out to the park to practice. And I remember putting them back in the car. And when I drove home, I usually take them out and bring them back into the house. And the staff said, leave us in the car. And I was like, oh, okay, you're going to stay in the car. Okay. And sometimes once in a blue moon that happens, I didn't think about it. That same night, I go to the shops and I'm coming out and I have to make this turn where I have to come out and wait for traffic clear on this side so I can make a legal U-turn. So I get in that lane and there's a car in front of me and there's tons of traffic. It's 5 o'clock and there's a car behind me that starts beeping and honking like continually, like really like just like never taking the hand off the honker. And I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling a little cocky. I just roll down my window and I flip the bird and I just stick my hand out like this. And I just, this, right? Because it was this side. And I'm just do, and they're honking. And I'm just like, because obviously the person in front of me can't go. I can't go. There's tons of traffic. What do you want us to do, dude? Chill out. So I'm just flipping this person off. And next thing he goes, oh, no, you didn't, bitch. And I was like, whatever. Cars start to move. I start to drive fine. So I'm driving. And next thing I'm like, and this is nighttime, is someone following me? And I turn down, well, I'm not even going to say where. I turn down and there's this long road and it's very dark. And I start to put a little gas on and I notice this car is driving behind me really close, like really close. And I thought, oh my God, is this that dude? And for a moment, Spirit came in and said, run the Merkaba of the car, run the Torus of the car, run your Merkaba, run your Torus. So I asked Universe to set those things in motion. Didn't think anything of it. Keep driving down this long road, finally get up to the light. This car is right behind me and Spirit said, take a left into the left turn lane. So I get into the left turn lane. There's a car in front of me. He goes over this side and he starts shouting his windows down and he's shouting and he's pissed. I mean, he's like aggressive. He picks something up from his car and he wields it at me. It hits the side of the car and I'm just sitting there completely detached, like just completely detached, observing this whole thing. He goes in front of traffic, around in the middle of the cross street, the cross whatever, where the lights are, even though it's not our light. He goes into the intersection, turns around, pulls up next to me where my window's down. I'm getting ready to turn left. He pulls up next to me facing the opposite direction and he starts cursing me out and he's angry. He's seething. And he's going, you fucking bitch. I mean, you can imagine he was just going off and off. He's like, don't you ever flip me off. And you fucking bitch. How dare you? I should fucking kill you. Well, he didn't say that. I take that back. Bubble of light. He didn't say that. His energy said that. But he's like, I should have my way with you. All this stuff. And the light went green. And I just looked at him and I says, there was traffic. There's nothing I could do. And that's all I said to him. And I didn't even think about it. That's just what came out. And next thing, the traffic started to move, coming up behind him. I went and he went. And I tell you though, so there was a blank few moments. And then I looked over to my right and I see the 2 stabs sitting next to me. And I thought, oh my God. And you know what else now I'm forgetting? The blindfold. Sometimes I practice with the blindfold. I had taken the blindfold to the park that day too. And I had never done this before in my whole life. The blindfold wanted to be hung over the rear view mirror and the stabs were in the car. So as soon as this breaks up and I drive off, he drives off, I have this like sobering realization. I see the stabs and I see the blindfold and I thought, oh my God, thank you. You too. You 3 items here have protected me in this 3rd dimension. They created this scaffolding that was so strong, that was so powerful, that didn't let anything fuck with me, right? I was unfuckable with by way of the grace of the protection of these dear gifts, right? These aspects, these things that I've been guided to do. Now, had I not had a relationship with them, and was I maybe not listening? And they said, leave me in the car. And I didn't leave them in the car. I don't know what may have or may not have happened. And that's just who knows, right? But the point is that I know, for me, from my experience, I know that these tools, divinely served me maintaining that sense of coherency, that no matter this person threw something, and I checked, there wasn't a dent in the side of the car, even though he threw something and you could hear it sounded like a brick just going boom, into the side of the car. Nothing was scratched. Nothing was hurt, nothing was maimed, nothing was harmed. I was in that place. Now, I did learn a lesson too, though, of, my own cockiness, and I don't have to react and respond. And again, that is not very like me, but that's just one of the things, right? One of the powers that I have recognized and that I want to share with you. Now, equally, I have a friend who has been going through a lot of issues, a lot of healing in relationship and in their own body. And they were guided to purchase a Mother Mary, a pure gold Mother Mary emblem for a necklace. And that even just them, they said that even just them purchasing it brought them just so much comfort, knowing that they were going to be close with this frequency and draw it in and bring it in for themselves. And, the thing about this, though, is that so there's no judgment, but there's a difference between, okay, buying the emblem, buying the totem, the little charm, the whatever, and then, connecting with it again, that relationship with it, using it, wearing it. So I went over to my friend's house and I'm like, oh, and I see the Mother Mary thing, and it's in something on the bathroom counter now, and it's not my business to judge or to say anything. But one thing that I just, as a teacher, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, we're called to, gather these items to help us get through these times, or to help us learn how to pray, or to find that spiritual sustenance. But are we using it? And I know that this person had said when they put that charm on and wore it as a necklace, that it was like instant relief. And knowing that they're going through a lot of stuff, I was curious, oh, why aren't you wearing it now? Like, isn't it, or is it, can it be a 24-hour thing, or is it an on off? Which I know, because we have a relationship, right? With the crystals, with the charms, with the totems, with the stabs, with all of these things. But are we listening? Are we developing that relationship? And the point of today's show is that there is a relationship to be had, and there's more you strengthen into that relationship with these tools you're guided to, the more amplified their response and their communication will be with you. And the more that communication is amplified and clarified, it becomes an ongoing conversation, which helps to serve the divine harmonic convergence of your life. The more you develop a relationship with all of those sacred aspects, you look around your home, look around your room now. How many things are gathered around you? When's the last time you've spoken to them, or given them love, or Reiki'd them, or just even, like, I kiss my staff all the time. I kiss the drum. But there's this thing, and then, because sometimes now, even yesterday, I went out, I took the staff, and when I came in, it said, okay, leave me outside the front door. There's different markers. It will tell you what to do and how to use them, and where then that staff or that crystal or that thing will be guided to be placed is going to help to create a new set point of energy, of incoming information for you, so that you can develop a new feed forward and feedback loop of information through the grid matrix and into your experience. Right? So that really, what are we doing? We're cultivating our mystical powers. We're cultivating our multidimensional beingness. And that's how we exist and reside through all dimensions, through all time space. That's a lot of parts of you. There's a lot of pixelations of you in existence through this idea of time and space, right? That exists as little fractal aspects. And the more that you create the correct conditions for coherency, for all of those parts of self to come into alignment as one, with heart, with truth, with love, this is when we begin to have that experience of heaven on earth. That's when we begin to experience that sheer divine protection, even when we're not being the most heaven on earth being, like me flipping the bird at the guy driving behind me. Somehow, by divine, sheer divine grace, I skid through that. I got through that. And I know I've told you the story about when I was held up at gunpoint before too, where it was the sheer, I mean, that maybe wasn't so much of a tool that I was using, but it was just my sheer inability to understand that what the man was asking for when he was asking for my purse. And I didn't understand what he was asking for while he was pointing a gun at my head. So I didn't have any fear. I didn't compute any fear because I couldn't understand what he was asking me for. And because the communication was not clear, it didn't register as something that I'm supposed to be afraid of until after. So let's go on. So now, isn't this interesting though, too? The brooms, right? It's very interesting. That first broom I was telling you about, I used to call it the love and the love and light broom. It was really the dark broom, the fear broom, because what I had realized over time is that it was there with me. It had come at a point in my life and at my healing when I was doing a lot of work with shadow. And my roommate, I had a roommate for many years who I believe identity thefted me and who took advantage in some really interesting and manipulative ways, but that I was not seeing, I was not sensing at the time. And in the disembarking and the releasing of myself from that relationship, that first broom did a lot of work. It did work for years after. It did work during the 3 years of my friendship with that person, and it did work for 3 years after the friendship with that person. They had gotten into my laptop. They'd really just infiltrated into every aspect of my being here. And so that broom was like, honey, we got to get to work. Sweep, 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 sweep. Besides all the 3D deleting of their information and blocking, all of those fundamental aspects. But then there's like, well, let's sweep all of these lines of energy, clear them, just as you would when you would light a piece of sage. Right? That's another third dimensional tool. How often do we feel that energy can be a little more cleansed, right? Things are getting a little stagnant between myself and this person, or myself and this job, or this relationship with this project. We can light a little sage. And we can invoke the cleansing of those lines of energy that connect us with those people, places, or things. And in the same way, the broom can do that for us, right? There's many ways that I use that broom in this way. And it's so interesting because that broom helped me so, so deeply. And at a certain point, I remember it had reached its height and it had done its work with me. And it said, and now it's time to burn me. And I was like, what? And it said, you have integrated the shadow now. You've learned your lessons with this individual. You no longer need this broom. It is time to burn me. And I remember that was a serious ceremony, and where I got to, from head to toe, make sure the entire broom had been set on fire and burned to its ultimate point where there was only ash. And in that way, I knew that karma was complete. I knew that what had taken place was secure, was indeed come to its full cycle. And over time, isn't it interesting? Then this little guy came into my view and said, I'm yours, I'm yours. And so I collected it and we worked together. And now all I have is the love and light broom. There's the mini broom that travels with as it's guided. And this is really this is when we have some binary, some light and dark, some shamanic work and stuff. But the larger broom is no longer needed. I needed the big broom at first because I had a lot of big issues. I'm trying to be funny here. But it's true. There was a lot of dark. There was a lot of freaking dark. There was a lot of tar. There was a lot of shadow. And the bigger the broom, I guess, the more vavoom that I was able to put into it. But ultimately, like my friends, like I told you at the beginning, like those friends who realized that they were the crystals and that they didn't need all the gear and the accoutrement and to wear all the gear and to have all the gear. You realize that you are the broom. You realize that you are the tool. You realize that, sure, I could have a huge broom, but really this will suffice because I know how to use, right? I know how to put to use the smaller broom with just as much vigor and just as much clarity, right? We don't have to have the big guns as much, but we know over time, and especially in aligning with that divine feminine aspect, that we're listening. We become intuitive. We listen to higher self, to spirit. And when it's time to then shoot the arrow, when it's time to use the broom, to call in the crystal, to awaken and activate the crystal ball, we know when it's time that it will be the most powerful time. It will be the most amplified time. to do so, right? And so it's not about, for me anyway, it's not about waving the broom around constantly at every given moment, although that might be a part of the awakening of the way that we move into it, and we learn how to have that conversation, and we learn how to use those tools we're guided to. But now it's more of a friend that is always around and used as guided. And it's the same thing with the crystal ball, right? These power tools come to us in so many different ways, or we're guided to be with them, but understanding that they do have a power, and when we do commune with them and create the correct conditions for that relationship, they will tell you how to use them. Like, I know for me, the crystal ball, this does not come out all the time, right? It stays encased. It stays encased and covered. And there are very potent times where it will ask to come out and participate, or be used as a tool, or be used in the light to call in greater light. And what about animal feathers, right? The totems, the ravens. Maybe it's a seagull, maybe it's a pigeon, but all of these divine totems, right? These gifts that come to us. And for me, raven is one of my totems. And if it is for you too, then you know, when you find a raven feather, a crow feather along your path, you're like, oh, this is powerful. And maybe not every feather is for you to pick up, right? But again, that's a part of cultivating the relationship. We say, oh, hello, are you here for me? Are we supposed to commune? Are we supposed to work together? Are you supposed to be in my presence? And you'll either get a yes or a no, and you can decide then from that point on how you want to interact, how you want to be with the tools you're given. But again, we can collect the raven feather, we can place it on the altar or somewhere special in the home, and it can do its thing, right? And not to say that the tools won't just do their thing, because that's what they do, they will. And as we're guided to work with them, then they will do more things, is the point, right? Are we putting our 3D energy tools to their fullest use, to their fullest power? They are here to help us. They're here to help us. There's a little place in New Mexico that I went to years and years ago, about 10 years ago. There's a church that's famous for miracles, and they sell an infinite amount of charms in that little church. And you can get a charm for anything. The partner I was with at the time was blind in one eye, and so he got a set of eyes. Right? You can buy a liver. There are these little tiny silver charms. I had bought a book, Milagros, a book for my writing, right, for the grid book. People have bought house Milagros, of a little house, so they're trying to find a new home or a new apartment to buy or to rent. There's a Milagros, a little miracle charm for everything you can imagine in this little store, and they hand make them there. So I had gotten some angel wings in my book, and my friend got their eyes, and all this stuff. And this church is famous though for people gaining those milagros, those charms, and then like being able to walk suddenly. And it's where they have all the crutches and all of the wheelchairs and everything on the wall, because people wheel themselves in and they walk out. Is the thing. What gives them that power? It's your belief, first of all. It's your willingness to allow things to be different from what they are. And again, that's you meeting it, and it then being given the right to meet you back. It being your healing, the resolution of a financial situation, right? Something that you're overcoming, an addiction, an issue in your mental sphere, whatever it might be. It's us saying, I call on help, really, which is what we're doing, is we're asking for help. And we're working in the metaphysical, on the multidimensional level. When you spin the staff, when you play the drum, when you work with the broom, when you sit with your crystals, when you evoke the essence of the medicine of the raven through the feather, and you call on that messenger energy, that wisdom, you are connecting in the invisible realms. You are evoking that part of you that exists outside of time and space, outside of the grid, outside of the matrix. You're saying, I am more than just a body. I am. I am. Yes, you are. Bippity boppity boo. So one of my, she's now one of my best friends forever. And I'm definitely going to have a little look through the comments in a second. But one of my best friends forever posted something in stories a little while ago, how she still has her magic wand from a Reiki workshop where I introduced to this set of dear students that I worked closely with for many years, how to make your own magic wand. How to direct energy, right, with a magic wand. And she still has hers and I still have mine, and mine has gone through several variations, and it's in process right now of its most recent incarnation, which is to add the tourmaline on top of the amethyst lithium, which has always been there. It's wrapped in copper, and it will be wrapped more in brass, and it wants to have leather and aluminum also, so it can be a really powerful conductor of energy. But this thing has gone with me and traveled all over the world. And I've had it for, what is it now, 10 years. And it's gone through different metamorphoses. And there's been times where I've lost it and I just haven't, I'm like, where is that thing? There's been times where it's been put in like the magic box with all the magic things. And I'm like, okay, we're taking a break from all that stuff, right? And then you go and you're like, oh my God, you find the box and you're like, oh, the magic wand, it's time. Is it time? And the magic wand will be like, no, put me back to sleep. Or yes, it's time, right? And so you listen and you get inspired. And then I didn't decide on how to create this. The wand told me what to do and what it's ready for next, for our next adventures. And like that, right, I'm working on a realm that is multidimensional, that is mystical, that is metaphysical, in the participation of developing that relationship with a power tool that is a third dimensional object, but that has the power to work within and through the fabric of this third dimension and throughout all dimensions of time and space. And again, to create the coherency, to help direct the energy of what it will be that will be intended and how this will be used. And again, there's never any force of energy. Never. It's all, everything we do is always for the highest good. Your shakers, your rattles, right? I remember I came back recently from being away over the holidays, and I thought I was fine. And then a couple of days in, I realized that my energy really needed some grounding and some clearing. So I took several Epsom salt baths and had a several days sort of coming back in. And I sat at the altar, and this little guy was like, "Shake me," and I was like, "Oh." And as soon as I started to shake, I could feel, I could see, I could sense all the frazzled chunks of energy in my aura. They were just waiting for the correct conditions, albeit the sound, the clack of this shaker, to dissolve, to dispense, to disappear, so that the aura can recalibrate itself. You have tools everywhere. You have tools everywhere. And like I said, the more that you use them, the more they can be used, the more they will show you what you can use them for, and the more they will come into your life. Now, let's just have a little quick Chimayo. Hey, Royal Corvez, things are getting too spicy for the, hey, girl. Hi, nice to see you all. Thank you for joining. Blessings and blessings. Oh, blessings, Reiki the energy. Nice to see you, sister. So yes, there is more. And I know the God phone called and wanted us to read a little bit here. Lesson 140. So understanding that as we use our tools, right, we're looking for something. When we use our energy tools, we are intending to create a new condition. We're intending to create a condition that actually already resides. But by using our tools, what we're doing is we are matching our frequency to that desired truth, to that coherent vision of healing, of wellness, of perfection that is already within us. We know it's there. It may not look like it in the third dimension, right? But what we're doing is we're invoking the power and the wisdom and that divine mystical quality of our power tools to help create the blueprint, to help create the directing of energies for us, so that that coherency can be. And it's a continuing saga, right? It's day after day. We don't just meditate once, right? And for every 20 years, we meditate every day, ultimately, because we know we are continually changing. There is only one moment, and it's happening now. And the more that we allow ourselves to relax into the now moment, to create the correct conditions to be present, so that we can move through the gate hole of that 0 point in the now moment and reside there, we realize that creating that, cultivating that is really so very powerful. And that's where we learn how to be in the world and not of it. That's where we learn to bridge heaven on earth. Only salvation can be said to cure. Cure is a word that cannot be applied to any remedy the world accepts as beneficial. What the world perceives as therapeutic is but what will make the body better. When it tries to heal the mind, it sees no separation from the body where it thinks the mind exists. One belief in sickness takes another form, and so the patient now perceives himself as well. He is not healed. He merely had a dream that he was sick, and in the dream he found a magic formula to make him well. Yet he is not awakened from the dream, and so his mind remains exactly as it was before. So according to A Course in Miracles, if it's not love, it is illusion. It is not real. And again, using our third dimensional energy tools, right? And the way that I intend to share with you is in a way that brings us back to that love, is in a way that brings us back to that powerful coherency where we already are healed. And according to A Course in Miracles, sickness is in the mind, and all it is, all any displacement or illusion is, it's the lack of love, it's the lack of God, it's the lack of it's lack, and it's the withholding of love, right? It's that separation, it's the judgment, it is that which keeps me disconnected from you and from the body of the universe. And it's in our creating the correct conditions, right, through evoking that divine relation with our third dimensional power tools, through our prayers, through our meditations, through our intention, right, that we gain the correct conditions. So many people are given water pills instead of the real medicine, and they become healed. Is it because it's all in their mind? Yes. According to A Course in Miracles, yes. Any sickness, anything that makes you feel that you are a body, that reminds you are a body, it's not real. And it shows us where there's a call for love. And so learning that when we invoke this aspect, right, we never actually, according to A Course in Miracles, we've never gotten sick. And if you think you feel something coming on, hit it in your mind, and because it's a thought, it's rooted in a thought. So change the thought, change the root frequency of what you're giving your mind to, and that will change what you're plugging into via the grid matrix, and in turn, what is plugging into you. It's a feed forward feedback loop. And so understanding, though, getting to that point where, wow, I was never actually sick. I am healed. I am well. I am whole. The cure, you're already cured. There's actually no need for any brooms, like that sweet couple who threw all their gear off the side of the building, right? They realize that they are the crystal. There's no need for all of these accoutrements, but in this third dimension, they are such gifts. They bestow such blessings to us. And they have such magical powers. They've been used for years and years and years throughout many civilizations, right? And as a medium, as an oracle, as a medium, as a way to make contact, to direct energy, to transfer energy, to create the correct conditions, to create contact with source, with love, with light, so that we can understand, learn, and amplify those qualities within ourselves and be and embody even more of that. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the waves. I'll be doing a Torus Tai Chi introduction workshop next Friday. The link is at my link tree. So go ahead and check that out. You can reserve your space. It'll be on Zoom, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time next Friday. I'm so excited to share that with you. That's another mystical, powerful thing that's come into being. So thank you everyone so much for being here. I'm so very grateful. Thank you and blessings. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, everyone.